And we're back with the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast. My name is Gerald Glassford from Pop Culture Cosmos, Inside Sports, and Game Source. We truly appreciate everyone out there listening to all of our great shows. But it wouldn't be a Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast without the guru of fantasy football. He is the man behind the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast. Full episodes are available each and every week on the Pop Culture Cosmos channel on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and over 30 different podcast outlets. It is my good friend. And boy, we got some stuff to talk about today. It is Tyler Baker. What's going on, man?
I'm doing well. The Redskins won, so I'm a happy man.
Okay, let me ask you this. If you had to weigh one over the other, fantasy football success or Redskins success?
Redskins. Dude, I'm a fan. I love football. I just love watching football. I'm in so many leagues and I'm stretched in so many different directions that it's really easy for me on Sundays to just shut it off. Like I've set my lineups, and where one guy is going to win me one league, he's going to cause me to lose in another league. So, Sunday morning I just double check my lineups, I set them, and then I enjoy football.
So that ends the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast.
That's it.
No. We're going to stay on the air. It is, once again, Tyler Baker. Great to have you here, as always, my friend. It was a very interesting and also very injury-riddled Week 6 in the NFL. And before I get to some certain subjects I want to talk about, including one in particular in Pittsburgh, that I think will have ramifications down the road for fantasy football owners, share us your thoughts on some of the, I guess, big movements, big things that went on in Week 6, but also a lot of injuries as well.
Something that I wasn't expecting down in Miami, there was a Brock Osweiler sighting today. And he showed up for Tannehill. Tannehill had an injury he's been dealing with since Week 6. I didn't think it was that serious. He had been practicing, and then all of a sudden this morning he was inactive, and Brock Osweiler was going to go face the Bears. And I thought, man, this could be a train wreck. Not so much. Brock Osweiler completing over 60% of his passes, 380 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Not stellar numbers, but Brock Osweiler stellar numbers. And it was enough to beat the Bears today.
I've got a better one for you, my friend. There was also another unexpected appearance at the quarterback position in Buffalo, where the Josh Rosen experiment. Oh, it's not Josh Rosen. Josh Rosen.
Josh Allen.
Yes, one Josh. I knew I know a Josh. In fact, I just got off the other line with Josh, which is the reason why we're recording a couple minutes late today. But anyways, too many Joshes in my head here. Josh Allen, their prized rookie. He went down with, I believe, an elbow injury, if I'm not mistaken. He was really hurting. Who comes in to save the day but Nathan Peterman?
Yes. And
the
hey,
NFL's best quarterback that's out there. And I'm being highly facetious. In fact, you would probably say he might be the actual worst NFL quarterback I've seen in quite some time.
Well, I'll tell you, his numbers were down today. He only threw 2 interceptions.
Yes.
So
but one of them had to be a pick 6. One of them always has to be a pick 6.
Yeah. So that, of course, alluding to that 5 interception half of football that he had in his debut last season. He comes in, throws a couple picks. There's a pick 6, like you said. Poor Buffalo. They just, poor Buffalo. They're definitely in a rebuilding year. And wouldn't it be great? Like, just daydreaming, I can't help but think how awesome it would be if the Bills traded LaShawn McCoy back to Philadelphia, where they're really hurting at quarterback, and got a decent pick for him. The Eagles have 2 second-round picks. Now, I don't know if they want to give up a second-round pick, for a LaShawn McCoy, but with those 2 second-round picks, they could give up a third. And wouldn't that be great if they could ship a third-round draft pick off, get LaShawn McCoy in, and help stabilize that running game there in Philadelphia? I'm just daydreaming here, but wouldn't that be great? I think both sides win there.
I think they would as well, but letting go of Tyrod Taylor, it looks to be an even dumber move for Buffalo. No, he didn't perform in the way that we thought he might have in Cleveland. Very little time in Cleveland to progress. They obviously wanted to put Baker Mayfield on there. So I will say this, that if there is a point in time when Tyrod Taylor gets another chance, I think he's going to be able to prove himself. Could that come back again in Buffalo? No, it won't, because there's some harsh feelings there that'll never be replaced. But Nathan Peterman is not the answer long-term as a replacement for Josh Allen. And Josh Allen better get healthy real quick, because it's just going to be another train wreck after another train wreck. Because you got to look at it with Nathan Peterman, 10% of his passes in his career have been intercepted.
Yeah. I think no matter what the question is, Nate Peterman's not the answer.
No, it isn't. But there was a lot of injuries that went on this weekend in the NFL. I'll tell you what, man. I know the Raiders tried to call you. They wanted you to play guard because I think they were running out of bodies on the offensive line. I know Amari Cooper got a concussion. I know also as well for the Rams, Cooper Kupp again got injured. There were several injuries across the board when it came to that people need to know about for fantasy football owners when it comes to the NFL.
Well, Gruden is into older players that are past their prime. I think I've got a shot.
There you go. That's true. That's true.
I'll be waiting for that phone call. Cooper Kupp. Still haven't heard anything exactly what's going on there, but they are deep at receivers. So as far as the team's concerned, they'll be fine. And of course,
and I heard he was questionable, at that time that he got injured in the game for the rest of the game. So maybe it's something that's not going to be serious long term.
Yeah, I hope so, because what he brings to that offense, he's just so good, and he has a really good rapport there with Jared Goff. If he does miss time, of course, Brandon Cooks and Robert Woods' stock will go up, also the tight end there. But this team is just going to keep on rolling. The Rams are just going to keep on rolling.
What about also as when you're talking about Amari Cooper as a wide receiver, his impact on the Oakland Raiders? Yes, they are considered to be one of the worst, although maybe the worst. It's kind of hard as to far a toss-up, in my opinion, right now between them and Arizona, who is worse. But Amari Cooper, one of their main standouts on that team, he's out with a concussion. Is there anybody that you think is deserving of the slack? Because Derek Carr has to throw it to somebody on the offense, doesn't he?
He does. I think Seth Roberts, he's been there for a while. I think he's probably the biggest beneficiary. Martavis Bryant is still there. As far as fantasy purposes, I don't know if you weren't too happy with Amari Cooper to begin with. You were really stressing every week that you had to start him, and it seemed like one week, like the even weeks, he'd have a great game. The odd weeks, he'd have a terrible game. So there was really a back and forth there. In fact, in a lot of leagues, Amari Cooper's probably been on the bench half the time. I don't know if taking a shot with any of those other receivers to get them onto your roster, maybe to play keep away. I don't think you want to start any of those guys.
The Dallas Cowboys, who we had considered very strongly for that bottom end of the barrel when it comes to the worst football teams, they have suddenly found new life in the past couple of weeks as far as their offense getting a little bit stronger and a little bit better, although at points in time, they're still not going to be considered as high octane as some others, but some interesting signs and some interesting things going on in Dallas when it comes to the Dallas Cowboys offense and the promise it could look for fantasy football owners going forward. Yeah,
today against Jacksonville, they've gotten back to doing what they do well: run the ball, play action, rolling out, and force feeding Cole Beasley. They really are light at receiver. You saw Gallup get a little bit more involved today. But Cole Beasley, just what he can do with the middle of the field, his quickness, his rapport with Dak Prescott is really giving them an offense that today they got a little creative with the play calling against a very good Jaguars defense that really didn't seem like that they could stop them. I was kind of off and on watching this game, and Dallas was converting on third downs. And like I said, you just give Ezekiel Elliott the ball and commit to that, and good things are going to happen. Prescott even was running the ball really well. So Prescott having the best rushing game of his career. So they're getting back to good football, run the ball, and be creative with misdirections and rollouts and let Dak Prescott force feed it to Cole Beasley. It's working for him.
It is, and hopefully they will continue to do that, although they are limited because of their lack of wideout speed or wideout elusiveness, but they're trying to make it work, and for now it seems to be paying off. Their consistency and Ezekiel, just enough. They're doing just enough to get people to look off Ezekiel Elliott 100% and to load 7 people in the box, which has always been an issue earlier this year because people were just loading up on Ezekiel Elliott because they weren't afraid at all of the Dallas passing offense.
Yeah, and they've got some speed there. And as fast as Tavon Austin is, it's not really the guy you want shooting down the field and going up and making contested catches or running a route that's going to gain any kind of separations. That's just not Tavon Austin's game. But, streak him down the field, kind of open things up a little bit. Michael Gallup, is a rookie, and we're still beginning to see what he can be in this offense. They have high hopes for him. Receivers usually don't come into the league first year and put it all together. But it's like you said, they did enough. And while the score looks really lopsided, 40-7, it was just that lopsided. But football's a game of momentum, and they really got early momentum. And Dallas's defense, you have to give their defense credit. It seemed like last year the personnel wasn't there. Marinelli just kind of coached them up. This year they've got some better players, and they're doing some good things. They're figuring some things out, and you're seeing this Cowboys team become a more complete team.
You're listening to the Pop Culture Cosmos.
Looking for an edge the next time you take on your favorite video game? Then check out Vitabrace High Performance Gamer Wristbands. Packed with the power of fruit seed oil, Vitabrace is clinically proven to help improve performance, giving you a better gaming experience. Head to miraclefruitoil.com and use the promo code MEDIA10 to get $10 off your Vitabrace purchase. Whether you're looking to beat the time on your latest speedrun or are fighting your way to the top on your favorite multiplayer or battle royale, Vitabrace can help you reach your gaming goals. Buy Vitabrace today at miraclefruitoil.com. That's miraclefruitoil.com. Vitabrace. Win with it. Once again, it is Tyler Baker from the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast. Check out our full episodes today on the Pop Culture Cosmos channel, available on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and over 30 different podcast outlets. My friend, when it comes to speaking about some of the things that went on in Week 6 in the NFL, you cannot escape the fact that even though it wasn't defeat, is Mitchell Trubisky starting to maybe bleed into a little bit of consideration as far as a fringe, maybe injury replacement type quarterback? Because not too bad of stats today. And over the past few weeks, yes, he did throw that 6 TDs, but his consistency more often than not proves that maybe the power of Mitchell may actually come to faith, and they may actually be a team and a quarterback worth watching down the road for the next few weeks.
Yeah, he's got a long career ahead of him. I look forward to that. As far as right now and for fantasy, he's definitely a streaming option. If you're streaming quarterbacks, which I have 2 leagues that I'm streaming quarterbacks, he's an option. He's not somebody you want starting for you every week. 10, even 12-team leagues. He's not anybody that would really interest me. I think I'd rather stream and, try to hit. It's kind of like Stafford. You like Stafford when you like trying to pick those games where you think he's going to hit. It's the same way with Mitchell Trubisky. Streaming option, absolutely, certainly. The numbers tell you that. But are you going to feel comfortable playing him every week? I wouldn't. And it's just how risk adverse you are because as we've seen, he's capable of putting up a 3-touchdown game, over 300 yards, 1 pick, but he's also capable of kind of disappearing. And, he's still growing as a quarterback. From watching him, I've got to think that he's going to grow in the right direction. Is he worth maybe a back of the roster stash? Maybe you could find a good matchup for him later in the year and play him sometimes as your starting quarterback. Yeah, sure.
One of the things I also wanted to talk to you about is the dearth of quality high-end running backs in this year's class, because we thought so highly of running backs at the beginning of the season, and little by little, the effectiveness of those running backs has gone by the wayside for many of them.
Mm-hmm.
One running back that has not fallen into this trap and is probably right now performing at a level that's worthy of a top 5 selection, and I know I'm being controversial when I say that, is Melvin Gordon with the Chargers, who I said as a team, I said, look out for them. Don't get fooled by I think there was their second or third week that they lost big and to the Rams. And I said, don't get fooled by them, by that big victory by the Rams. They are a good team, and they look like somebody that could actually do some damage later on the road. They're 4-2 right now, and a lot of it is based off of Phillip Rivers, the ageless wonder. But really, also quite a bit of that can also be attributed to the tremendous performance and tremendous season so far of Melvin Gordon as a premier running back in the NFL.
Absolutely. And there was a lot of value coming into the season in your fantasy football drafts. There was a lot of value, late round picks that you could get pieces of this offense. And it was such a sad thing that Hunter Henry got hurt. Can you imagine how much better this offense would be with Hunter Henry? Oh my goodness. But you could get Phillip Rivers for next to nothing. Melvin Gordon was one of those guys that was outside of the top like 5-6 guys.
He was like a number 9, 10, 8, in that range.
Mm-hmm. So you could get him second round. You could get a mid-late second round, which I did in a couple leagues. And I'm doing really well in those leagues. But it's like you said, this is a high-powered offense. This offense is going to put up points. It's very rare that you see the Chargers come out and not put up 24 plus points. It's very rare. Like you said, Phillip Rivers, the ageless wonder, not stellar numbers today, 207 and 2 touchdowns. So if you started him in fantasy, you're probably not too happy. But Melvin Gordon, oh my gosh, 3 touchdowns, all on the ground, 132 yards. And even when Austin Eckler kind of carved out a role in this offense, a lot of people thought that Eckler was going to take away from what Gordon was doing. But as we see with the Saints offense, there's room for Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram. This is a similar situation for fantasy purposes in that this backfield can support Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler. I mean, even Keenan Allen had 41 yards rushing today. And we still haven't seen Mike Williams really come on. Today, it was Tyrell Williams that led the team. So this team has a lot of weapons that they can use. And, Tyrell Williams is very frustrating, especially for fantasy, because he will absolutely disappear for a couple of weeks, but then he'll come and just drop a gem. So this offense there's just a lot of fantasy value here. If you've got Melvin Gordon, you're super excited and, already looking forward to next year. I think you're going to see Melvin Gordon as a first-round pick instead of a second-round pick.
I see it as well. I think he's done a tremendous job being part of that Los Angeles Chargers. See, you still got me saying that.
Me too. I do it all the time.
Los Angeles Chargers offense. He's been an integral part of their success so far, and I think he's going to be a major reason why there is playoffs in the future, possibly even this year when it comes to the AFC. I think they're going to be a big part of that playoff picture. They are, to me, a quality team on both sides of the ball. Are they going to be a team that's going to match up well with the Rams or some of the big teams in the NFL? I don't think so. I still think it's more like a wild card, or even if they win their division, they're still going to be like a first-round loss. But I still see some playoff potential for the Los Angeles Chargers, the forgotten team in Los Angeles, the, cast off and exile from San Diego, whatever you want to say. I mean, nobody goes through their games, but people shouldn't forget about them as a football team because I really think they're a quality team going forward. Yeah,
and they're going to have to get a playoff spot. I don't see Kansas City. It would be hard for me to believe that Kansas City doesn't win the AFC West. But the Chargers right now, if the playoffs were tomorrow, the Chargers would be in. I think they've got a really good shot. They'll probably get some competition for a playoff spot from the AFC North. And then the AFC South, I think Jacksonville has to rebound. I'm not sure if Tennessee, as happy as or as excited as I was to see what LaFleur was going to do in Tennessee, they just can't seem to get it together. And then the AFC East, Miami is pretty much a mirage in my opinion, even though they won today with Brock Osweiler. Hey, these things happen. But yeah, I think the Chargers are in a really good spot to continue that momentum and find themselves in the playoffs.
One thing more before we leave, my friend, and on this wrap up of Week 6 in the NFL, one of the things we've been able to talk about over the past few weeks, actually, I want to touch on two things. One of the things first I want to talk about is something I mentioned to you over the weekend. My thoughts on it is that supposedly, if the reports are correct, Le'Veon Bell will sometime be reappearing for the Pittsburgh Steelers at some point in time in Week 7 or Week 8. Now, obviously, his stay in Pittsburgh will be short-lived because he's going to become a free agent. Pittsburgh, obviously, the issue there with him and them is really not good to any stretch of the imagination. And the fact that they have James Conner playing in that offense now and doing so well, another 2 touchdowns this past weekend, it just it does not bode well for the future in Pittsburgh for Le'Veon Bell going forward. My question to you is, because of the success of James Conner, could Le'Veon Bell be the product at least a little bit of that Pittsburgh offense? And if he does go to another team, he signs on as a free agent. Let's say someone like Detroit. Let's say he goes to Detroit, for example, and let's say he becomes.
That would be awful.
It's an example, my friend.
Okay.
Just if he goes to Detroit, he will still be so highly thought of as a top 5, top 10 choice at running back. But is that necessarily going to be the case? Is he full talent that he will be able to succeed anywhere, or is it a little bit because of he could be a byproduct of the tremendous Pittsburgh Steelers offense? Because we're seeing so many great results with James Conner as well.
No, I think Le'Veon Bell is a very special talent. He is going to have to land in a spot where they're going to be able to use him in what he does best, and that's his patience at the line of scrimmage, waiting for things to open up, and then hitting a hole where maybe there wasn't a hole where it was supposed to be. So he's developed a really good chemistry with that offensive line, with what they do in offense there in Pittsburgh. I don't think it comes quickly, at least not to what we've seen in the past. When he moves on to somewhere else, they're going to have to get used to him and maybe acclimate the system some to what he does well. But he does so many things well. He's a great pass catcher. He knows how to run routes to get open and to get where he needs to be. He's an excellent runner, great vision. I mean, he is talent-wise one of the best backs in the NFL. So he could go honestly just about anywhere, I think, and have success. And it's just going for him. It's going to be finding who wants to pay him all the money that he wants, to find a team that is ready to win and that is willing to pay him. I think that's going to be his biggest hurdle, especially with what he's shown this year. In that, I mean, a franchise tag, I don't want to heap too many judgments on him. But when you're a part of a team and the team wins together and loses together, and it seems like that there's some animosity, not just between him and the organization or his agent and the organization, but when you kind of let your team down like that, I think that that's something that other GMs and even other teams around the NFL are looking at and seeing. Now, players respect the fact that, hey, you need to get paid while you can. But I can't help that every other GM, the other 31 GMs in the league are seeing what Le'Veon Bell has done, and maybe are thinking twice about giving him a gigantic contract, because when you give a player as much money as he wants, it's going to diminish different parts of your team. And so he's going to have to find find the right place to go. And I'm not sure yet where that would be if he comes back. And the reports have been that Pittsburgh is coming up to a bye here in week 7, that he was going to report and then start playing in week 8. The last I read, he hasn't even contacted the Steelers. So I don't know. I don't think anybody knows when he's going to show up. Week 10 is definitely the limit of how long he wants to hold out. As far as when he comes back and what that does to the Steelers offense, it's a little bit of a question mark. Connor has been playing really well. And I don't know if it's a situation where Le'Veon Bell is back and they just run him into the ground because he's not going to be there next year and they don't care, or whether there's going to be somewhat of a committee there. I tend to think it's a committee, and especially a guy that hasn't played in so long, for him to come back. I don't think they give him a full workload right out the gate. I think it is kind of a committee type thing. I think that you're going to have packages with Bell and you're going to have packages with Connor. And, for fantasy purposes, I think if you have either one of those guys, you're going to start them both. If you're a Bell owner and you picked up Connor, that's when you're really going to have to kind of ride the storm, I think, and just kind of figure it out as it goes, as they play a couple games together. And we realize that they're going to, somewhat ease Bell in, after you get a couple games into it and kind of feel it out, we'll be right around for the, getting ready for the fantasy playoffs. So for those fantasy owners that have both of those guys, I think direction will present itself maybe by week 10, 11. But if you're an owner of just one of those two, I think after week 8 on, you're going to have to play whatever piece you have of that, because kind of like what we were saying about some of these other high-powered offenses, like the Saints and the Chargers, there's going to be room for both of these guys to eat. You're not going to get quite the production as if only one was there, but there's still going to be a lot of fantasy points there for the running backs in Pittsburgh.
You're listening to the Pop Culture Cosmos. Don't touch that dial. Wait, do people still use dials?
Check out what's been going on with the Pop Culture Cosmos Show and the PCC Multiverse.
I see the potential for basically like another Netflix kind of paradigm shift where here comes this other major player. They have a ton of resources. Apple could change the way that entertainment is consumed.
They say it's the only time this year that you'll have stars from each brand battling each other, and we know it's not going to be the case, but they like to say that, and more power to them, I guess.
Well, it's a big first step, bringing all those superheroes together. There were definitely some parts of the movie that I really enjoyed, and then there were some parts that I thought just kind of fell short of expectation.
Part of it has to be something to do with how it's being promoted, and this is a thing where audiences do not agree with critics.
That's the Pop Culture Cosmos Show.
And the PCC Multiverse, every week on the Podcast Radio Network and Apple Podcasts.
And over a dozen of your favorite streaming and podcasting options. Once again, it is Tyler Baker from the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast. We noticed in this weekend in the NFL, there were some quarterbacks that are household names that really we know that are going to do the job each and every week that for some reason or another didn't do a great job, but that we should make sure and we hold on to for fantasy football teams. But yet there were others on less successful teams or who are not very great performers that suddenly seem to find the magic from the week to week. I want to ask you, how can you as a fantasy football owner determine which quarterback you should rely on going forward? Because I see some signs. One thing this weekend I want to notice, for example, to think on was, yes, Andrew Luck hit for 4 touchdowns and 300 yards, but barely made 50% in his completion ratio, which, as you know, is not entirely his fault. If he throws the right money, somebody drops it, what have you. And we all know receivers in the NFL have a tendency to get a case of the dropsies. But your thoughts on how to determine which quarterback you need to get going forward, and with these bye weeks that are coming up and more teams going on bye, if you need to pick up a quarterback, what are some of the things you need to look for?
Well, that's a really good question, but I do want to remind you, no matter what the question, who isn't the answer?
Well, actually, I'd prefer Brock Osweiler, but it's certainly not Nathan Peterman.
It's not Nathan Peterman.
No. Unless your fantasy football league scores and gives you pluses for interceptions. I've heard a couple that do negative, fumbles, penalties, interceptions, and whatnot, and like a reverse, fantasy football.
Yeah. Well, look, if anybody listening actually played Brock Osweiler, I want to know about it. Because if you, excluding like 2 quarterback or super flex leagues, if even in DFS, if you said, you know what, I'm going to take a shot today and get really creative. If anybody did, I want to know about it.
Absolutely. And you can send us your thoughts about that on popculturecosmos@yahoo.com or to popculturecosmos, Humanica Media, Game Source on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, on our YouTube channel, or even you go ahead and sign up today for the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast Facebook group. You can sign in and let him know personally on that Facebook group. There's over 200 great fantasy football fans that are on there as well. If you have any thoughts on, if you have a trade proposal that you're trying to send somebody or that you get, a waiver wire pickups, lineup changes, so much more, whether you want to do it privately by DMing, by direct messaging Tyler, or you want to just put it out there for the entire group to get their thoughts, just go ahead and be a part of it today, the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast Facebook group. And I'll tell you right now, you will not regret it because it's actually a great Facebook group. And we, just anybody in there to give you their 2 cents if you want on exactly what's going on in fantasy football.
Yeah, there are some really knowledgeable fantasy players in that group, and there's always good feedback.
There is, not only from the likes of you, myself, but there's so many other owners out there. I see sometimes when people put out lineup changes or proposed trade, they say this guy and this guy for this guy and this guy. Is that a good trade? Is that a good trade? And you'll see like 5, 6, 7, 8 responses on there that really gives that person an idea of exactly how that fits into the whole parameters as far as the feelings and overall mood of whatever it is you're trying to do, whether it's a lineup change, waiver wire pickup, trade, or what have you when it comes to fantasy football. So it's a great way to bounce off ideas off of each other, and that is the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast Facebook group. And again, our show is available each and every week in its entirety on the Pop Culture Cosmos channel. My friend, it's been another great weekend in the NFL. So looking forward to week 7 in the NFL and obviously getting to that discussion on quarterbacks, because for me, that position has always been something I've actually just really focused on and trying and hit a home run with each and every year when it comes to fantasy football.
Sure, and it's tough because right when you think you have these defenses figured out, the coaching staff of an offense will pick it apart and dissect it and find something that works. And you know what? As with quarterback and running back and wide receiver, all of the skilled positions, what you're really looking for is opportunities. Who is going to have the most opportunities to do something on the football field? And we'll dig into it deeper, but there are some teams that are going to run through the quarterback position. It's Indianapolis, for good or bad. It's Green Bay. I mean, when has Green Bay really had a running game? It's all about Aaron Rodgers. That's why he's the number 1 quarterback in the league. With Rodgers, it's yes, his talent and some of the talent around him, but a lot of it has to do with that he is how that offense runs. And there are certain teams that are going to put more on the quarterback, and then there are other teams who are not going to put as much, and so you kind of have to find that sweet spot sometimes. And
take, for example, a team that I played with as far as from the quarterback position this past weekend that did not work for me, the LA Rams, who you and I both talk about as the best team in the NFL. They still won, but they had a subpar offensive performance, and it was really centered around Todd Gurley because the passing game and Jared Goff, who I have as my quarterback, didn't quite work out with no touchdowns and just an interception that really didn't work out. But like I said, this has been something that has worked for me week in and week out. But when you have so many options like that, sometimes when your offense is not performing as well, you got to go ahead and just devote it to one part. And for fantasy owners, that means either the quarterback or the running back.
Yeah, for me, Jared Goff kind of falls into that phylum of, hey, he can absolutely light it up, and he did like 2 weeks ago. He can light it up, or they can win without doing that because they do have a good defense. They do have Todd Gurley. So if they get into a situation where it's best for them to play good defense and run the ball, then they have the chance to do that. Whereas Indianapolis is never going to be in that situation. Hey, we're going to play good defense and run the ball. No, you're going to try to outscore the other team. So when you have a guy like Jared Goff, and he is going up against the Denver Broncos, who have a pretty good defense, that's when you would kind of want to shy away. So there's like a category of quarterbacks where it's kind of match up heavy as to when you want to play them. And then there are some quarterbacks that you never want to play that could still have Brock Osweiler put up 300 plus yards today. That doesn't mean you're ever going to play him. And then there's quarterbacks where you play them every week. You play Drew Brees every week. And sometimes Drew Brees has bad games. Sometimes Aaron Rodgers has bad games. Sometimes, some of these other quarterbacks have bad games, but you're never going to bench them. You're never going to bench Aaron Rodgers unless he has that injury that he had. But now that we've seen that he's healthy, guess who is never going to see the bench again? Aaron Rodgers. So Jared Goff is definitely in that category of you really have to look at the matchup to decide whether you want to play him or play somebody else.
And then there's our friend Nathan Peterman.
Never the answer. The answer is never Nathan Peterman. Poor guy. I feel bad like trashing him. I'm sure he works really hard and I'm sure he's just trying to play his best, but unfortunately 10% of your passes go to the other team. It's time to maybe learn how to long snap or punt or something.
That's why he belongs in a category all by himself.
Oh, yes, he does.
He's that player that's on the very, very bottom of the fantasy football list for pickups, and they only should be picked up by someone who's looking for a gag, or if you've got like a reverse fantasy football bizarro world type league or something like that.
Yeah, it's not often that your quarterback runs the risk of giving you negative points. You see it sometimes on defense. You see it sometimes with the kicker, but never the quarterback.
Again, a category all by himself. My friend, it's been great talking to you. Great having you part of the show. Great having you part of the Fantasy Football Paydirt Podcast. And of course, right here on the Pop Culture Cosmos.